Hey there, everyone. I hope you have had a chance to listen to the meditation recording, the 10-minute practice. If you haven't, go back and listen to part one first, because you'll probably benefit more from it that way. Sometimes our heads get way too much in the way. And so it's great if you haven't done the part one first, I encourage you to do that. But if you have, I hope it was useful. And I wanted to spend the next few minutes here kind of in explaining some of the instructions, right? So in the first video, you did a short little practice like you've done probably many times before. In this video, I want to talk a little bit about why we do what we do in a trauma-informed meditation practice. So I wanted to make this for you because there's so many folks out there who are teaching meditation, and it's really wonderful that it has become so widely spread in the United States, because God knows we need all the help we can get. And it's really important to recognize that when you are using an app, you might not be getting the full benefits of what it would be like to work with a qualified meditation teacher. So if you have been using an app, I'm super excited for you. There's lots of good ones. And for you to have a trauma-informed perspective on your meditation, I wanted to take some time to explain to you some instructions that can be really, really helpful and beneficial, particularly if you are somebody who has tried to meditate a lot by yourself and find that your head is all over the place, and or just maybe you've never really gotten an understanding of why folks are doing what they're doing. So I want to kind of walk you through what we did in part one of the meditation. All right, let me double check my notes are here. Okay. So one of the first things we want to make sure that we're doing when you come into this intention to practice this, to do this mindfulness practice, is to notice where you are in space and time. Now, I know this can sound really obvious to folks, but it's really, really important to notice where you are in space and time, right? So I know for myself, like if I'm meditating at home in my room, my nervous system is going to probably be in a very different place than it is if I am just sitting in my car for a few minutes, maybe say before I have a big meeting, right? Where I'm kind of anxious already. So noticing where you are in space and time is really, really important. I find that it helps us to let ourselves off the hook. It also gives you an opportunity to signal to your nervous system that you have looked at the external conditions. Folks who work with me know that it's really, really important that before we go inward, we got to know where we are externally. And for a lot of us, orienting externally isn't necessarily safe. So just noticing that if that's true for you, and acknowledging that and seeing what can you do to make it safer. If there are things, anybody who's experienced trauma in their life is incredibly resourceful, and that I know. And so this offering of these instructions are kind of some things to think about, are really designed to support you even further. So we start off by noticing where we are in space and time and cutting yourself some slack. If you're like, if you've moved into your parents' house and they're having an argument in the next room and you're like, 40 years old and you've got a work call that's come up on the phone and, you're kind of flipping out, like your tolerance is going to be kind of different from somebody who might be, in a place that's safe, or there's not a commotion going on. So it's important to recognize that for yourself. This is a lot of what I'm going to be saying maybe goes without saying, but you'd be surprised how many people I have found who don't know some of this information. You also want to find a comfortable position. Now, what might be comfortable for you on any one day maybe isn't comfortable the next day, right? So maybe you're like, yeah, I'm going to be a meditator, Felina, and I'm all into it. And I'm going to sit in full lotus. I've been doing my yoga and I'm going to practice being my meditation. And then you get in there and your like knees are stiff and you're like, you've had a really long day and you're like, oh, wait, you know what? Maybe I just need to be on my back. Listen to that. If you can, if it's at all possible, I want to encourage you to be gentle with yourself in this process, right? We don't need more beating ourselves up into shape. We need greater gentleness and greater compassion. So I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, when I went to do a 10-day silent meditation of a Vipassana retreat, for the first 4 or 5 days, I think about the first 4 days, I was really committed to being in a seated position. And by like the fourth day, like my knees were like on fire. It's like, oh my God, I can't do it anymore. And I had to sit in a chair. And guess what? The meditation police didn't come after me. It was wonderful. And I was able to be kind and compassionate with my body, because that's so important. And I could continue to practice. So get comfy, seated, laying down, pillows, whatever you need to do to feel that your body is physically supported. For folks who have experienced trauma, a lot of times we're so much up in our heads that we don't even want to feel our bodies sometimes. So taking the time to check in with yourself and acknowledge, like, oh, what would feel more comfortable today is really, really healing. The next thing you want to look at is, like I said before, orienting externally before going inward. This is generally a really good practice. I want you to be aware, particularly if you have identities that are marginalized, for people of color, people who are differently abled, folks who are in LGBTQ communities. It's really, really important to take the time to orient externally before going inward, because your nervous system has extra demands on it. And that's really good to know as well if you are a space holder, right? So if you teach meditation or you teach yoga to folks and people are coming in and you're like jumping right into meditation when they're still trying to get a sense of like, okay, who's in the room, you could be causing harm, right? So this is really important to be thoughtful and intentional. And if you have a yoga teacher or meditation teacher who makes these faux pas, please feel free to gently send this note to them, right? Send this video to them, because not everybody is trauma informed. I was teaching Buddhist meditation and had been practicing for a number of years before I really cultivated the skills of being trauma informed. And I'm so grateful that people taught me. So if you have a teacher or you go to a yoga studio where they don't make time for that, feel free to send this to somebody, to your teacher or a friend or practitioner who could benefit from it. So now that you have checked in with yourself and you've decided that it's reasonably safe on the outside, right? Reasonably being the operative word, because we can't guarantee people's safety in this culture, unfortunately. And then you've gotten physically comfortable, like in terms of laying down or seated. Those are the ones I'm suggesting for this practice. There's walking meditation, there's standing meditation, there's eating meditation. But for today, this is the one we're focusing on. So then the instruction that you'll hear in the recording that I made for you in part one is to become aware of your feet and your legs and whatever is touching the ground. Now, why do we do this? Well, I don't know about you, but most people in this culture, like I said before, are up in their heads, right? You're like, oh my God, I got all these things to do. It's like, what am I going to do for my vacation this summer? And whose email did I forget to respond to that email? Did I make my dentist appointment? God, I got to get dog food. Literally, this is all my to-do list, by the way, right? My poor doggy needs food. All of your energy can be brought up into your head and you can be spinning in these thoughts. So when we take a moment to feel our legs and our feet, sometimes for many folks, you might notice that there's like a little bit of a deeper breath and you're like, oh yeah, the ground is beneath me. The ground is supporting me, right? So just notice that as you're listening to me use these words. Notice what you're becoming aware of. For some people, being up in their heads is a safe place to be. For others, it's kind of scary. But when you bring your awareness to your feet and your legs or whatever is touching the ground, right? I don't want to make any assumptions that folks are able-bodied who are listening to this. So you can bring your awareness to whatever is touching the ground or the earth or the surface closest to the ground. It's really important to take that time to acknowledge that you might be going inwards, but this earth is beneath you and it's holding you and it will be here for you when you come out. Even if you just go in for a minute-long meditation, earth is going to be here for you when you come out. Promise you this. Might be shaking sometimes if you live in California like I do, but chances are it's going to be safe and stable. And that's really good information. So you take time in your meditation to notice what's beneath you. And you want to become aware of the gravity and how gravity is holding you in place, right? So, gravity is this force that keeps us kind of like magnetically connected to the earth, right? It's like your kitchen magnets where you put all your lists and stuff. That force of gravity kind of magnetizes us and pulls us to the earth. Why is that important? Because our nervous systems need to be grounded, right? I don't want to get into too big of a conversation about what that means, but if you have any questions, let me know about that if any of that is unclear. Because very frequently, what you'll find as you connect with the solidity beneath you, whether it's the ground or the cushion you're on, or the sofa or the bed, you might become aware that you're holding your breath. Again, as somebody who has a pretty intense trauma history, for years when I tried to meditate, maybe not for years, but definitely for months, maybe for years, I would notice that I was holding my breath, right? I was so used to being contracted in my nervous system that even bringing my awareness to my breath would cause me to hold my breath. And that was interesting, right? That was kind of like, it felt scary, like, oh, if I'm breathing and bringing my awareness to my breath, something bad is going to happen. Because at some point in my life, that was the story. And so you might notice yourself that you might find yourself holding your breath when you do a meditation. Now, maybe you've been listening to an app for years and years and been trying to meditate, and you listen to it, but it's not really changing things in your life. This might be one of the reasons, right? So again, I'm going to reiterate this. Reach out to a qualified trauma-informed meditation teacher to give you some guidance if this is something that you're really, really interested in doing. And because believe me, even folks who are really well-meaning in yogic lineages and in the lineages of Buddhism aren't necessarily a trauma-informed. So once you become aware of the solidity beneath you, then you can become aware of the rise and the fall of the breath, right? First, you have to have some solidity. First, you have to know that there's a ground beneath you before you can follow the waves. Otherwise, it's too chaotic. It's just way too chaotic. And I see a lot of folks coming to meditation who are so overwhelmed, and then they try to sit down or lay down to do a meditation, and then they get more overwhelmed because there's all of that movement happening with the breath. So if you can, really take the time to get comfortable, as we said, and to come to movement only after you've checked in with solidity, right? That's a really great principle that can guide us in so many things. So once you become aware of the breath, you're going to start noticing the rise and fall. Now, if you're like me, and when I started meditating about 20 years ago, I was holding my breath because I was afraid something might happen. That was part of my trauma history. And you'd be surprised how many people who have a trauma history are attracted to meditation because we're great dissociators, right? I certainly know I was. So what that means was I wasn't feeling the sensations in my body. And it was life-saving for me to dissociate in parts of my life. But to know that is when you are practicing a meditation, it's really, really helpful to be aware of that, particularly if you know your own history. If you're one of those folks who is listening to the apps and you don't have a teacher or a coach or a therapist or somebody you're working with, and you're just trying to do it on your own, please keep in mind that any of these things that I'm mentioning could be a really good sign that you might just need a little bit extra support, right? There's nothing wrong with you. As my teacher, one of my teachers, John Kabat-Zinn says, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than is wrong with you. And I love that. It's really important to me to hear that. So while you're following the breath in the meditation, you notice the inhalation and you notice the exhalation. So it's great to do this. Okay, it's in the afternoon in Palm Springs. It's getting hot in here. Whew, gotta say that. Okay. As the expansion and the contraction of your lungs happens, you're going to be riding these waves, right, of inhalation and exhalation. So you're not controlling them. You're not forcing them. You're just watching them, just like you would if you were watching the waves, right? You're not trying to control the waves. You're just watching the waves from the shore. I love to watch waves. It's something really soothing to my nervous system. And that is a really helpful metaphor when I think of mindful breathing meditation, is of just, noticing that my breath is like a wave. It rises, it falls. There's expansion in my lungs, and then there's contraction. And then it happens again. And so as you're doing this, you might notice that your head starts going crazy, right? You might notice that your mind is wild. And what I'll say is, if you're interested in practicing, you can just notice maybe once in a while of like, oh, okay, I'm in my to-do list. Can I come back to the breath with compassion and gentleness? Right? Not like, oh God, you're the worst in the world. You're never going to be able to meditate. There's something, terminally wrong with you. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. I promise. I've taught many, many people how to meditate, and I've been exposed to thousands of meditation students. You can always become aware of your breath. You maybe just touch into it for a moment, and then you can go back to your to-do list. But just do it with patience and compassion, right? Just like if you were training a small puppy dog, really, really gently. Because the minute that you notice, like, you're like, I'm in one breath, two breath, three breaths, and then my head is off to the races, and I'm thinking about like, oh God, I didn't respond to that text this morning from somebody. Is she going to be mad at me? Is she going to be whatever? The minute you notice, I'm not focusing on my breath, I'm not aware of my breath, you've already come back. You've already switched into the awareness. I don't want to get into too much detail about what that's all about for now. But if you're curious, like I said, let me know. So what that means is, this is a great opportunity to practice letting yourself off the hook. Your intention to practice meditation is a huge gift for yourself. And if your mind is telling you those stories that your head is too busy and you can't practice and everybody else in the whole world can do this except for you, trust me on this one. You're in very good company. I've lots and lots and lots of folks have said the same thing. And I certainly was one of them. I can assure you, when I began to meditate 20 years ago, literally, I couldn't believe how busy my head was. I remember talking to my meditation teacher and saying to him, like, does everybody else have this? And he said, Felina, welcome. You finally become aware of how busy your mind actually is. And that's the first step. So do not freak out if that's what's happening to you. You also want to practice at some point in the meditation of just noticing if there are any places of tension or tightness, and allowing them to soften and release if that's appropriate, right? Because here's the thing, that tension and tightness are here for a reason. They're probably here to protect you in some way, something that's important to you. So we don't want to just push them away. We want to just acknowledge the tension or tightness. And if you're curious and if you want to explore how it would be to release a little bit of it, maybe you try just a tiny bit, you just touch into that. And then maybe you can bring the tension right back, right? If you want to. This is really, really important, because a lot of folks have been taught to, have been shamed for experiencing tension or tightness in the body. And what I can tell you is that for many of us, that is a response to the circumstances that we're in, or to previous trauma. And that can be anything from a visit to the dentist to a breakup with somebody when you were a teenager, or last year even. It can be all kinds of things. So the invitation here is to be really, really compassionate and gentle with yourself. It's also a great idea, if you can, to get into the practice of thanking yourself and congratulating yourself, because it takes a lot of wisdom to be here. Like, if you're still watching this video, which is awesome if you are, by the way, thank you. A lot of wisdom brought you here. So really, and a lot of digging probably, and you probably didn't get here because everything was smooth and easy in your life. You got here because something has led you to want something more for yourself. So just take a moment to thank yourself and congratulate yourself for that. I find that most of us are way too hard on ourselves. And believe me, it's a growth edge for many of us. Because incredible healing can happen when you show up for yourself on a regular basis. And so it might be useful. It can be very useful when you are in your meditation, as we did in the short part one today, to make an intention or a commitment to come back to this place within yourself again. That intention is really, really powerful, because even the intention to practice your meditation is more likely to make it a successful meditation, for many, many reasons. You can consider each attempt as improving your karma for the next time, right? So each time you sit in meditation, you're making it more likely that the next time will be easier, perhaps more joyful, perhaps more expansive, perhaps with more of what you want in your experience, more of what you're coming to meditation for, frankly. And then consider maybe celebrating yourself, and consider doing it again tomorrow. What I have observed is that a meditation and mindfulness practice can be a tremendous gift. And while we don't want to beat ourselves up when we don't practice, I've seen tremendous results when people become really, really committed to doing it on a daily basis. So you might want to experiment, and give it a shot and see how that works for you. Lots of folks will do a 30-day challenge, for example, of like 10 minutes for a 30-day challenge. I led a program, an online program several years ago. And one of the favorite parts of it for many people was we did 30 minutes of meditation for 30 days. And that was super, super wonderful. People loved that because nobody believed that they could do it. And they did. So anyway, so those are some thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Please feel free to reach out. Let me know your thoughts on this. I hope this video was useful for you. I hope it gives you more clarity on how to make any meditation practice more trauma informed, particularly a mindful awareness practice. And let me know if you have any questions. All right. Bye for now.